Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Simon Ryan. I'm located in Kent's Investment Director. It's the role of me and my team to create jobs in our region. We do this in two main ways: supporting businesses to move to the area and to support businesses that are here to grow through investment. I'm joined today by my colleague, Christine Moses. She's monitoring the chat room and the social media. And I've got three incredible movers and shakers from the region's commercial landscape who I'm going to introduce to you in turn. But to set the scene for this morning's discussion, we don't want high streets to look like this. The reason high streets have become this kind of scene is many and varied, but the heart is lower footfall, and that people want and need something different from their community centres than is being provided in a lot of towns.
Simon, your slides are not sharing.
Are they not?
Nope.
Are they now?
Nope.
Okay. How exciting. How's that?
Perfect.
Hey, I love a little technical hitch to get us all warmed up. So and what's great about this is you've all appeared, and I was feeling lonely. You've all appeared on my screen, so now we know why you'd all disappeared. So that's fantastic. So this is what we want high streets to look like. This is, of course, the delightful Rochester. It means more visitors, and that communities start to have a stake in how they work, live, shop, learn in the centres. So why aren't more people working in town centres or close to town centres? I'm going to suggest it's because we have the wrong types of working space. Large office footprints are pretty much a thing of the past. Technology, flexible working patterns, outsourcing, different supply chain models have all contributed to the rise in smaller employers and the demise of the really big employers out in the regions. And what we need to remember is, of course, that 90% of businesses in Kent employ fewer than 10 employees. It means Kent, and then, of course, the use of technology, and you may have found this in your day-to-day work since lockdown, when it's all perfectly acceptable for us to be online from home at different times, is that we can now agglomerate in different ways. We don't have to all be in the same town. So if we think back to the strength of the City of London, take the insurance sector, its strength was all of the top brokers in the world were based around Lloyd's of London. Well, actually, is that still such an important challenge? Are the new ways of working going to offset that requirement? Certainly, if you look at Southeastern and the commuter numbers, commuting is still less than half of what it was before the pandemic, something like 46%. What does it all mean for Kent and Medway's high streets and their opportunity to thrive in the post-COVID world? How do we support more intellectual property-led enterprises, professional services that can travel to London nationally or internationally to do business, but can take advantage of living and working in what we call home in Kent? And what role does the flexible office space have to play in this as well? So we are going to go through these questions with our experts this morning. Now, before I introduce them, this is my last little bit of waffle for you before you can start getting involved, is I want to give you an idea of how this session works. So don't think this session's about us just waffling on. I want you to think like this. You've kind of stumbled across two or three people talking around the croissants, just as we would have done if we were doing this live, and we're talking about these issues. This is your chance to jump in, post your comments as well. Christine is going to keep an eye on those comments, and it's your chance to jump in as well. Try not to get any croissant crumbs on us as you go. The session's going to work best with your input, otherwise it's just going to be four dull people chatting away. we want to explore the way forward. I don't really want to look back to what's caused this. I want to look at the way forward. We want to stimulate more office supply. We want to match that demand. But that's not just about the amount of space. It's more importantly about the kind of space. And we'll be talking about flexible office space as well. We need architects to create spaces that can adapt and evolve in real time. We need planners to make this possible in town centres. We need businesses to come and fill it and make the scene as well. So my first expert that we're going to speak to this morning is actually from just outside the region. Sorry, it's probably needs no introduction. So what I'm saying needs no introduction. Rather famously, opened a new retail outlet about 4 weeks before lockdown, which some of you might go, probably not the wisest move, but it was a while in the making. And that's of course Stefano Kokomo from Macnade. And if you haven't been to Macnade in fashion, what on earth have you been doing? Now here's a company that certainly thrived and pivoted during the last 2 years. Like I say, opening a new outlet, Ashford, opening a new food and beverage outlet in Tunbridge Wells as well. Now, Stefano, you've had a fairly stable business for a long time. You're sixth generation, and you had a model. It's established, and it just went on and on and on. What on earth how on earth have you coped over the last 18 months when, frankly, shopping has just been turned upside down?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Yeah. I mean, I have to, Frank, in the first instance, we're grocery retailers, so we were in a position where we could continue to trade. And I think what a couple of points you've already made for us, actually, it's been about management of space. We very much talk about favorite place concept. Yes, whilst we transact, for example, through grocery retail, what we're very clear about is creating, and all the more relevant as we go through with the conversation with online sales, etc., is creating reason for people to come into the physical space, and that's often emotive. And then those transactions will fit around grocery retail as well as hospitality, F&B. And that's been has always been the core of our business. I mean, from an agricultural background, again, we've been farmers for a number of generations, but we've sat at the center of a community from a supply chain perspective, as well as an economic employment perspective. And that's just something that's now carried through to our principal food hall, original food hall in Faversham, and in turn, our F&B hospitality food hall in Ashford, and now a new site in Tunbridge Wells, creating a reason for people to come out into those spaces. And that's what has really carried us through and part is our strategy going forward. I think it's relevant, perhaps we pick up later on, talking about master planning. Yeah, from my perspective, we're at the SME end of that. So we see a lot of high level master planning, but it's the SME businesses at our end that actually create the fabric and the texture that then actually it allows those master plans, those beautiful ideas and objectives to occur on a day-to-day basis. And that's been very much what we found over the last 24 months.
Awesome. Thank you, Stefano. This is going to be interesting because you already flushed out so many questions that I've got for you there. Now, our next guest is going to be Andrew Griggs from Creston Reeves. Creston Reeves, of course, needing no introduction either, probably one of the larger professional services firms in the South East. On the surface, any other accountancy and financial advice business, of not-for-profit businesses, of organizations, but of course scratch the surface and there's a really talented team. And if any of you have followed Creston Reeves on social media over the last year, incredible culture as well, and there's really come together around the challenges of lockdown. So Andrew, how many staff do you have in Creston Reeves?
We have just over 500 people in total, partners and staff.
Right. Okay. And now, look, I've visited your offices, Canterbury, Discovery Park. They're quite diverse in themselves. I suspect London's even more different. But they're friendly. They're productive spaces. Everyone's got their head down, as you'd expect in an accountancy firm. You're all billing away. But look, how as it's, because we're all pretty much working from home, is the office dead for you?
No, the office is not dead for us at all. I just think the purpose of the office has changed and evolved over the last 18 months for people.
Well, given that culture is so important to your business, it's because clearly, your business is about collaboration, it's about expertise, it's about teasing out, a client coming to you with an issue and having someone in the business with the expertise to deal with it. How on earth do you do that then if very few of you are actually in the office?
Well, I think, interestingly enough, I mean, just before we went into the pandemic, we decided as a board that we would put culture at the forefront of everything we do in the business. And in fact, on our board, we actually have a board member who's purely responsible for cultures and values. And that's really, really, really important, because it stems through what we do in terms of how we communicate with people, our IT structure, how we interact with one another, how we understand our people. So there are a whole load of different things. And you mentioned earlier, I mean, social media for many organizations has vastly increased, but it's really important that we get that blend. I mean, like many businesses, you know, we went from being in the offices to not being in the offices overnight. And that's just, we've had to adapt how we work with each other.
Cool, excellent. All right, well, we'll come back to that, because there's a lot in there to unpack as well then about the future of offices in your workplace, and I'll be interested to know what views you think your staff have on the subject. But our final expert is from outside the region, and his name Seb Royal. Seb runs Platform 9 in Brighton, Hove, and Worthing. Some of you'll be familiar with his office space. Now, this is hardcore co-working. This is fantastically successful, flexible workspace, open workspaces, high design value, full of creatives, but full of businesses that are kind of in the ecosystem of entrepreneurship on the South Coast scene. Seb, is the office dead?
No, it's not dead. It's just changing. And so, yeah, I mean, just some background on our space. You know, we launched in Brighton 5 years ago, and I moved here 10 years ago, and then I did that commute to London, and it really, I have to say, it was a couple of hours, 2-3 hours a day of commuting, and I thought, you know, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? I live in this great city, and I thought to myself, well, why don't we launch something which would allow us to live, for me to live and work in the city. And a lot of people might think that Brighton is this vibrant place, and there'd be loads of this type of office space back in those days, and there wasn't. And we were one of the first to launch in Brighton. And at that point, the office space market was, I don't know, moribund, dull, grey. People didn't really like work. They were all offices above shops. There was no connection amongst people. And a lot of permitted development had taken place in the previous years. There'd been no real office development between 2008 and 2016. And it was just tired. 30,000 people a day commuting up to London. And what's happened since then, since we launched, and we were probably part of that sort of change and that sort of catalyst for change, and we led the way in this flexible working, well-designed space, is suddenly people discovered this new way of working, and there was just so much demand for it. And people would come in and go, "Gosh, this feels like I'm working in London," and it's just something that I really wanted. And since then, Brighton and Hove, and now we're not in Worthing yet, Simon, but we are looking at that market because there's a sort of feeder into Hove and into Brighton. There has been 150,000 square feet of co-working flexible office space developed in that time. We remain very, very busy. We have 1,000 members, so an estimated 5,000, 6,000 people are now working at a co-working and flexible office space. It's not all individuals. It includes larger organizations all working alongside each other, very community spirited, and it's transformed. I'd say it's transformed the city in many ways, and people are now living and working in the city, and that's been changed. And over the last couple of years with COVID, we were almost ahead of times, because now everybody's discovering this way of working, wanting to work close to home, and we can't keep up with the demand. It's just down to finding the right kind of space.
So let me just let you know, because I'm always interested in trying to find data that kind of is a proxy for how the world has changed. So you've given an interesting one there that's about I think you said about 3,000 people working in co-working. Is that right? Or
I say
6,000?
nearly. I think it's 5,000. About
Five-
I estimated 5,000 people working out of.
So 5,000
co-working.
people working co-working in Brighton. So that's about 20% of what was once commuting. So that's quite interesting, and on how that cost and that time has been traded for something different. An interesting stat that I came out last week was the statistics on listening and viewing, so radio listening and TV viewing, is that far fewer people are listening to early morning radio or watching early morning TV. So now, someone myself used to commute to London. My radio consumption started sort of 5:30. With people not commuting, their radio consumption starting at 7:30. So and again, I think this is because people aren't commuting either, and they're using their time differently. So Stefano, traditionally 60% of retail trade was at the weekend, wasn't it? Is that still the same in this kind of new world, or is that leveled out across the week?
Yeah, and I think again it's part of the bricks and mortar is that physical experience, right? Is an emotive experience. And I think so. You're then getting the delivered services to home have meant that actually it hasn't been a complete swap. I think a little bit like the same way that you're probably finding, people moving to co-work. It's not just people who previously commuted moving to co-work. It's actually potentially new businesses now seeing opportunities that they perhaps wouldn't have had. So I mean, weekends are still very, for us again from an F&B point of view, are important. From a retail point of view, are important. But certainly we're seeing, I think, the use of space for all sorts of other purposes other than just purchasing, and particularly again the delivered aspect has helped with that. So we'll, again, with us, where we have from an F&B perspective, where it'll be a casual dine sort of approach, we will see our spaces used from morning through till late afternoon. We've just opened evenings at the weekend, and that'll be for all sorts of, whether it's friends meeting, whether it is actual business meetings, whether it is people coming in to shop, buy their bread and milk in the morning. So I think there is a spreading out. I mean, I will make the point that we're not seeing standardized retail flows returning yet, and so there is still a fair amount of a flex there. And I think that calls one of the points made on the chat about the importance of flexibility and rapid change, is the fact that is understanding how people are using space. But I think ultimately it's just, from our point of view, we have to be offering an experience that adds value and that can't be achieved at home, either through stuff being delivered via the likes of Amazon, what have you, or coffee is a good example, the ability to deliver a decent coffee, right? So we're seeing more pickup during the course of the week, and I think part of that is just people. It was long-term trends as well. People wanted to be out of the home to share experiences together, enjoying eating and drinking out of the home in a way they hadn't previously. But weekends are still important as well. Yeah.
Sorry, I was on mute. So, Andrew, does that mean all your team are just sitting in Mackney drinking coffee with their laptops?
No, not at all. I mean, we probably have on average people coming into the offices 2 or 3 days a week still, and it's really important for them. I think for many of them to do that. I mean, probably about 20% of our people are in some form of training, and you could argue in a professional services firm you're training every day until you retire, and it's really important for people to come in and actually work with one another, share experiences. People have always talked about, if you just lean across a desk or see somebody on the way for a photocopy, you're more likely to ask them a question than, say, book a Zoom or Teams meeting to ask them the question. So people are feeling they do want others around. I think the comment has been made, certainly by the former governor of the Bank of England as well, that you can become too siloed just working at home. You need to be in a larger environment to get that sort of collaborative, wider picture thinking as well, sharing thoughts. And we need to do that for the creativity of going forward. So yes, I think, I think it is really important that people still come into offices.
Cool. Okay. Kristin, have we got any questions or chat?
We do, yes. So there's one here. Do the panel think there is a need to revise our town and city planning policies, which at present do not allow for flexibility or for rapid change?
Seb, do you want to take a back swing at that one? Oh no, Seb's on mute.
All right, apologies. Yeah, I mean, the answer is yes, I think broadly I think in my experience, the councils find it hard to lead on this stuff. They don't necessarily know what is happening within the market. They've got many other things to deal with. And what my experience with this is, we have had to be independently minded when we're moving forward with all of our developments. And I think it's been frustrating dealing with a council who move very slowly. We have a council which is split in between three parties, and it's very hard to get that kind of progression, and we just have to battle through it. So I'm not, from a planning perspective, the permitted development was the piece that was the most challenging. So office space was disappearing so rapidly. And that has, what that meant was residential development took place, which then meant people were living from their, more people were living here. And then there became a flip, it changed, and it knew there was a requirement for people to, for offices to be built. So I think perhaps what you might find in places like Tunbridge Wells which has seen that kind of, I think 200,000 square feet of space has gone to residential, is then that flips at some point and then goes back to commercial development. I don't have as much experience, I have to say, as a developer. All right, so to be, I'm more on that kind of end user. We take leases, we don't develop our own spaces. So I wouldn't want to kind of give the view as a property developer, but I would say that that's being encouraged far more, and that the flexibility of planning. And what I've also noticed in here is when residential developments are given planning, there's an element of commercial office space which has to be built as part of it. So that was seen as a change, and those, because people want to work close to their office space. So it is changing. It is slow, and I think what I learned is not to always point the finger at the council. Because they have their own challenges and their own funding challenges. So it's very difficult to do that, but try and work with them and encourage that. So, and I think change will just, they will absorb it in time.
Cool. Excellent. Thanks, Seb. And Andrew, what different challenges have your team found coming into the office? Because presumably traffic's lighter, parking's easier, but are there fewer bus services? Are there fewer cycle lanes? What else would you want from your local authority to facilitate flexible working?
Well, interestingly enough, and some of our offices have actually been out of town, and one of the drivers for that originally was so people could have parking spaces. Parking in cities is challenging. People now personally value their commuting time in a funny sort of way, which would include parking. So I think ease of access is to an office is really important. But I think the whole mentality has changed in terms of many people would have thought, well, my job involves going to the office from 9 to 5:30 or whatever it is. I think that's now changed. People are more output driven in what they're looking at. And so they're saying, well, why am I going to go into the office? What benefit am I going to go and get from that office? And whether it is the collaboration or it's a fun place to be, either sort of meeting colleagues or from even, dare I say, the mental health awareness point of view. That's something that we've struggled a lot. So I think rather than looking at the office as a place where you do your job, I think an office is a place where you potentially meet. You meet colleagues, you meet clients, you meet customers. And so the environment in the town has to recognise that, so that it's actually, oh, I want to go into the office today for this, rather than I have to.
Fine. Okay. And what about you, Stefano? What do you need the planners to change?
Yeah, to
facilitate new ways of shopping and experience.
Perhaps I'll take a slightly different direction, just from a bit of experiences. I think one of the barriers that needs to be overcome is not necessarily whether change needs to come through the planning process, and of course, I'm sure it will, and that will take time. But it's actually the use of language and understanding within the SME sector, for example. So I think often barriers to innovation in urban spaces is often because there's a disconnect between much larger stakeholders, be they the developers, the council, etc., and some of the smaller stakeholders who may well have very innovative and businesses that can fit within the present framework, but don't have the lexicon and language to be able to express that, or indeed engage some of the larger stakeholders. So what you end up finding is that either there's there hasn't been availability of funds or support. And so I think that's often been missed out. And again, I want to come back to, yes, it tends to move towards larger stakeholders getting involved, and you lose some of that colour and texture that would add a huge amount of value. And that becomes, and it's shifting, but historically that's been quickly the point that you get these great master plans at the top level, but to deliver them, and often think of sort of a grey day in February, for example, it takes innovation of the ground floor. And I think sometimes it's simply tooling up the SME sector and supporting the SME sector to really understand how they can express what it is they're bringing to the market that actually will function within a present planning scenario, but perhaps they just feel the barriers are too high for them to jump into it. So I'm sure there's plenty that can be done, but I think in the first instance, often it is some of the larger stakeholders really taking the effort to engage with smaller new stakeholders, should we say, to get them into the marketplace.
Excellent, thank you. Christine, anything else?
Yes, there is a hands up from Graham. Graham, do you want to unmute yourself?
Mr. Galpin.
Can you hear me? Because my sound's been funny. Can you hear me, Mother?
We can hear you, Mr. Galpin.
Right. Oh, thank you, Simon. Yeah, I'm listening and I'm hearing a lot of things that we encountered. Well, I encounter across the country, but we initially in Ashford, looking at that joint development of business accommodation and residential. That is absolutely essential for town centres to work in future. And I'm really glad that experience was mentioned, because the fact is that, barring a bit of human company, as has been pointed out, you could do everything from home if you wanted to. So it has to be worth your while to go out. And I'm interested to say that you can't expect the councils to do everything, but I see plenty of councils as I go around the UK who are doing virtually nothing. And the result is disarray and disappointment from everybody involved. So we can't let councils get away scot-free. They have to take responsibility, and even as a local planning authority. So we can't allow them a free pass. They have to be part of the solution. And I think that there are some really good examples, and Altrincham, Ashford, Margate is doing very well at the moment, I have to say, and I'm very pleased with that. But it's you can't do it on your own, and you can't do it as a council. So it's about joint working, and I'm sure that this is what's going to come out of today. So thanks very much for you're listening to me as I rave on. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. There is also a question from Karen here. I think that's for Andrew. Andrew, how many days typically would your staff be in the office per week?
Between 2 and 3 days. It really does vary from person to person. There are some people who actually, from their own point of view, need to come in 5 days a week. That's what works best for them. Other people have actually got into the home working, and depending on the type of their job they're doing, they feel they can do more of it at home. But I think on balance, I mean, we went back to 2 days in the office from July and encouraging people to do 3. But it's about how best to not only do your job, but how you develop your own person and career as well.
Seb, is that your experience as well in Flexible, that most people are in 2 to 3 days a week?
Yeah, I mean, some people come in every day. There are some office spaces that we'll see are full. So companies will rent offices, and they'll see them pretty full most days. But generally, they use it on a flexible basis. So they will work from home a couple of days a week. They might go up to London or go wherever their work is. Their customers are 1 or 2 days, and then they'll use us for the balance. And what I hear from people is that they want to be around. Have human contact. We do a very varied events program, which is really to kind of to get that community spirit going. We engage with the community at large. So we'll have the Fringe and the food industry, and we do pop-up food events, and so there's always something going on, and people can dip in and out of what they like. And that goes back to this, I think one of the part in the chat was about experience. You know, I don't see co-working, co-working at its base level is just flexible office space. But I see it much more as a place for people to come together and to interact. And that's what they enjoy. Now, these days, it's comfortable for people to work from home, but it's very, very difficult to do it 5 days a week. And it can be very, challenging sometimes if you have family. And so, yes, that's what we see, Simon. And we give different types of memberships for the type of usage. And
so here's the interesting thing then. So when I opened up, I was talking about technology has enabled us to work flexibly. And then if you look at the pandemic, that's probably been the catalyst for us all doing it. Yeah, all three of you are kind of saying, but the value is not of coming together is not about technology. So Andrew, you're talking about coming together as community. Seb, you explicitly said community, and Stefano, you're talking very much about maybe an experience. And because of course, if we look at technology, like you said, Andrew, before we started the call, you bought every single member of your team a laptop. And Seb, I'm sure you got really good broadband and Wi-Fi in your building, and Stefano, you traded throughout the lockdown with e-commerce, what have you. So although technology is a neighbor, there's a bigger need here, isn't there? There's a bigger driver that's much more about people. Is that fair, Stefano?
Absolutely. I mean, again, my tender age of early 40s, I've been involved in sort of market town since for the last 20 odd years. Yeah. And so there's always a conversation about death of this, the death of that, right? But it's just that the cycle's coming around, and the constant is people. Whatever happens around that is a constant. And so, like we said, the technology has allowed for us to focus on what's important. I think from an experience point of view, the joys of Zoom meant that we haven't had to meet people in person who we didn't feel was necessary, but have been able to have a Zoom conversation for it. And I think that's sort of an added value. So when you do meet physically, you've already assessed in your own mind that it's probably more than just a casual interaction. Again, I think food and drink, again, I have a bias towards food and drink, but I think that's, again, a great leveler. It sits at the heart of everything. We all sort of have an idea of that. And it is really just building these communities in perhaps what would have been a marketplace 20, 30 years ago, is more and more around space that people are interacting for what they need. And I think that flexible office, as Seb said, again, it's the moniker that's there, but it's just about managing space for people to engage.
Yeah.
I think just one of the other things, last thing I'll say on that as well, so I'm sorry, that idea of siloing and innovation, right, is the fact, the irony of, I think is the opportunity with co-work spaces, that you get sort of disparate businesses in together in a way that the traditional office didn't do. And I think that's, again, an extra level that is now being recognized, that innovation, when you have a mixture of businesses coming together on a regular basis, is far more dynamic than actually just people coming together in a specific office space. And I think that for me is quite exciting as well. And we see that just as use of different spaces for people to work within, live within, you start to get sort of real sharing of ideas.
Yeah, no, agreed. All right, so look, Andrew, we're all agreed the office isn't dead. We've all agreed that although technology enables, it's actually still about people coming together. Does that mean in a year's time, all things being equal, you'll be back to everyone in 5 days a week?
No, I don't think we will be back to 5 days a week, because I think I think the dynamics have changed. As I said earlier, I think people view the office for different reasons now as to what it was before. I think we're all adapting to the new way we work. As Stefano has just said, people will only go to a physical meeting if they really need to go to a physical meeting. Many meetings, look at us today, for years and years, we would hold this face to face. There's 350 people coming to the Kent Property Market Report event online. So things will still go ahead, which don't have to be in the office. People have also, in some respects, I would say some of the relationships have got stronger by not coming to the office every day, because people have actually made more of an effort to get to know each other. They've organised sort of team events. We've done virtual sports days, quiz events. We even did a Christmas party for over 300 people as well. So people have learnt to live in a different world. But so I don't think they'll necessarily be in 5 days a week. But I think, as Stefano also said, we go through cycles. So I think we're in what I call the pre-new norm at the moment. So we don't exactly know what it's going to be like in 12 months' time. All we probably know is it won't be like it is today or 12 months ago.
Fine. And similar for you then, Seb. So do you think Andrew should be planning to move everyone into co-working? Because the value, that you're talking about of your facilities is about networking, curated events, and all the rest of it. Is that something a big employer should be going? Actually, why am I trying to do this myself? Should I be outsourcing that in many ways to a different type of community experience?
I mean, would I advise Andrew to move all of his team into co-working? I think, well, I mean, of course, but that's possibly not practical. I think to learn from the market is important. I think where there's small teams in different locations, I'm not quite sure where all, you talked about having 300 people in your organization. If there are small offices and small places, then perhaps, taking space within a larger co-working, flexible office provider would work. I think that particularly ones where there are things going on and it's not just taking space from a, traditional flex provider. We do have those organizations with us. So, we'll have companies taking 40, 50 desks. We have one company who's taken 50 desks with us from London, moved down from London. They have 900 people altogether, and they started using this, what's been known now as hub and spoke model. So moving out of central London, catering for people who want to work locally. And so we have that. We've had a government department taking space from us as well. And part of that is to be aligned with these communities and these interactive sort of spaces, and then learning from it and putting that into your space. And we've seen that with a lot of organizations, transforming their space into flexible areas to kind of come together, hot desks, little booths that people can meet. And I think that's just happening now. And even though I was in a meeting some lawyers the other day, and they've created spaces for that. And you see people working around tables together. So that's what it is learning. The talking about flexible working technology, that is enabling this. That's what it is. I mean, nobody's fixed to their desks anymore. People don't want to be working from one desk all the time. Some people have to, but that's really how I would see it. And also hosting meetings, coming for events in these types of spaces, taking people out of their environment and working in a place which is used to hosting events, not just in hotels. And restaurants, taking them to an environment which is a work environment, it's buzzing, well designed, and we see that a lot. So.
Excellent. Seb, Andrew, Stefano, I really appreciate your time. Unfortunately, we're up against it now, and because everyone is going to have a comfort break before we have the main event. And so look, I want to say thank you. I've kind of certainly done a 180 that I thought this was all about technology and enabling, and why go to the why go into the workspace, but actually the values I've just been drawn out more of why we do these things, because it's about people and community and engagement, collaboration, innovation, all those things, and that's actually the value of these spaces. So so that's been really useful. I really wanted to drill down a little bit more on accessing more space and making more of this happen, but that will be a call for another time. So thank you to all my guests. Christine, thank you for doing an awesome job on the chat room, and for all of you joining in this morning. I really appreciate you choosing to give us some time. The main event starts at 8:45, so you go and make yourselves coffee and have a comfort break, and I look forward to seeing you at the main event. Thank you all very much.